everybody. This is Marty from Dog's Blog in the noontime report of the morning session of the Frank Carson et al. Trial on December 21st, 2018. Court was scheduled to start at 9 a.m. Judge was on the bench at 9:28. Unknown why there was a delay. She was there on time. They were supposed to do a ruling. She was supposed to give a ruling on the 402 hearing that they had day before yesterday. In regards to the gun, the search warrant at Bobby Outwall's house. The DA has withdrawn that hearing and says she will establish ownership of the weapon through other means, is what she said. So the big surprise of the day, or the big news of the day, was Robert Woody was then brought into the stand. He's on the witness stand today. Jury is up at 9:33 after Robert Woody was brought in. Marlissa Ferrer started out with a few, questions, just a basic question, trying to get things going. And talking about in 2012, he was living on East Avenue in Turlock by Poppencork. He was just 3 houses down. And he had done some work at Poppencork for about 9 years. He lived at the house that he lived in. His mom, dad, his son, his sister, his niece, his nephew. There was another one I didn't catch that lived there in that house. The family had lived there about 20 years. There were regular customers at Poppencork during that time. Marlissa Ferrer had him identify Daljeet Atwal and Baljeet Atwal. And he also noted, too, I thought it was interesting, that he identified Baljeet Atwal, who was sitting behind KB. That's exactly how he put it, who is Kurt Bunch. So he calls him KB. I guess he has his own personal nickname for him now. They're that good of friends. He said he had known the Atwals for quite a while, pretty much for the 20 years that they had lived there. He worked in and around the store for 9 years. He did odd jobs around the store. Sometimes he did stocking. Sometimes he did work outside in the lot or maintenance. He said he was doing odd jobs. He said at first he got paid, and then they slacked off a little later. He thought they were having money problems or something. They gave him cash whenever he needed money. He was paid for... He said he was paid for a workday in full, but then they started building credit with the store because he was constantly taking things for the family and stuff from the store, and they were taking it off his account that he was working for. He said he worked long hours, sometimes over 12 hours a day, 7 days a week at the Poppencork. He was asked if he knows a neighbor that lived next door to the Poppencork, a gentleman by the name of Brooke, and he said he had known him for many years. He did some work in the field on the lot next door to Poppencork. He says there was an old house there that they tore down that he had used a backhoe or something on, a bulldozer, and he bulldozed everything out. He threw some seed out there, put grass in. And then there was parties and a barbecue on the lot with law enforcement officers, PDs, and CHPs that would come over to the barbecues. He stated that Walter Wells and Scott McFarland would show up at the barbecues, but he doesn't ever remember. He couldn't remember any other names, and he also said that Quittenar would never go to the barbecues. He said the Outwalls were having financial problems, it seemed like, and they stopped paying him, so he continued working without pay, but still accumulating credits. He said the Outwalls treated him good for a while, and then started getting rude. He said both brothers. He was closer to Daljeet, and he said that Daljeet was a funny guy. He said at some point Dee started calling him stupid, ignorant, and dumb. There was an objection and a long sidebar after that. When they came back, he said that Daljeet called him curse words like fucking, retarded, dumb, and ignorant. He said he continued to work there despite being called those names and not getting paid. He said Baljeet treated him okay, but at times he got out of line too with him, and he said he would treat him like a jackass. And I also noted Robert Woody's facial expressions and demeanor. He looks pretty angry when he was talking about the Outlaws. He was asked if he knows Frank Carson. He knows him from the court case when he represented him on the stolen property case. She's showing Robert Woody the minute order for that court date, which was in January of 2012. That wasn't the date that Frank Carson represented him, but that's when he went to court, and he didn't have an attorney at that time. When he did go to court on that date, they just put it over for him to get an attorney, and Robin Attenhofer had gone to court with him, and I believe Dee also went with him on that one time. He did not have money for a lawyer, so the Outlaw said they would take care of it and find him a lawyer, and they did, Frank Carson. Said he met Frank Carson, it was about the third court date that he had. Robert Woody had to continually refresh his memory with the transcripts of the minute orders that Marlissa Ferreira had, the copies of the minute orders, because he wasn't clear with the dates, and he doesn't know months. He admitted on the stand that he can't say January, February, March, April, and so on. He uses dates, 1 of 2012, and so on. He has to do it that way. Again, after the second court date, he still said that he didn't have an attorney, and Baljeet Atwell had called Frank Carson, but he actually did not see the phone call where Baljeet had called Carson to make arrangements, but was told later on that Frank Carson would be representing him. On his third court date, he didn't recall who went with him, and Frank Carson did make an appearance on that third court date. He stepped up and said he would be telling the judge he'd be representing Robert Woody on the case. Marlissa Ferreira bounced back to how the Atwalls treated him. He said he saw a handgun, shotgun, assault rifles at the store. He saw Dee carrying a gun in an ankle holster or in his pocket. It was a small pistol of some sort. He said it was not a wheel gun, but a semi-automatic loader. It was black in color. There was a bigger gun that was kept by the register, and also he carried it on. Daljeet Atwell carried it on his waistband at times. He started talking about the back room and the bar in the back, and the dimensions. He had no idea what the dimension was, but there was a bathroom, a shower. There was a granite-topped bar in there, some chairs. She said cops hang out there. They drink in the room. Dee is also drinking and visiting in the room. Bobby sometimes is back there, sometimes both of them if they have somebody watching the register. He knows Scott McFarlane through Quintanar and from Poppincork. He knows Walter Wells from Poppincork in the back room. He said Quintanar never drank or hung out in the back room. Walter Wells would be in the back room drinking fairly often. She went back to his court date. She was really jumping back and forth on these questions. He said that Frank Carson didn't show up on his third court date, which he just said he did. And again, she showed him some minute orders that she ended up having marked for evidence. It was on February, I believe they ended up saying February 14th, 2012. And then he says that Frank Carson was there and made an appearance in court, and that's when he took the case. So he got really confused about that. He doesn't understand questions real well. He met Frank Carson in Frank Carson's office, but he didn't recall when. but it was after the court date sometime. The jury was sent out at 10:35, so they were there make it about right at an hour, and they were sent out for break, and then they had some things they had to talk about, and Judge Inigo was asking Marlissa Ferrer in regard to the neighbor of Robert Woody and wants to know where she's going, and talking about this neighbor by the name of Brooks Varner. Marlissa Ferrer says Varner lived next to the Poppincork lot and wants to know if they ever talked about any of the Poppincork activities. Judge Inigo says that again, it sounds like Marlissa has got the cart before the horse. She's anticipating what the witness will say to set up impeachment of another witness. She says it's a little premature at this point. This is something that she constantly tries to do. Then again, Judge Inigo also asked Marlissa what gun questions that she's going to ask and why she's going to ask him. Marlissa Ferrer says credibility of Robert Woody and state of mind of just following the Atwalls because he was scared. Why Robert Woody lied in some of the earlier interviews also. It all goes to the control of Robert Woody by the Atwalls. It shows conduct of Daljeet Atwall exercising dominance and control over Robert Woody. Judge Inigo and Marlissa Ferrer, as they often do, they kind of ignore the defense attorney sitting there, and they go into a kind of a legal conference about the legalities and what they're doing, instead of just making a ruling and deciding what needs to be done. And this was they were having a conversation about 1101 evidence. You remember that's prior bad acts and its character evidence. And Judge Inigo has actually ruled on a lot of this stuff already, and she says that this may require an instruction. So I don't know if this is one of those that she's already ruled on or not, but it sounds like she's going to let her bring it in, but it's going to require an instruction to the jury. Finally, Hans stepped in and said, well, Your Honor, can I be heard? And he said this is an 1101 argument. Hans argued that the Dominic Saldana situation, where Daljeet had called him a tweaker and a thief and pointed a gun at him. Now Marlissa Ferrer is saying the DA, that Daljeet Atwall pulled a gun and tries to intimidate Robert Woody. He said there were some jury instructions and some things that needed to be done in regards to the other one, and it is inappropriate to be done here. Marlissa Ferrer is trying to create Robert Woody's state of mind of being afraid and with some of the questions that are being asked. It is improper at this time by Marlissa Ferrer. The question is being asked by Marlissa Ferrer. It's improper at this time if Robert Woody, as he has not independently expressed concern, any type of fear of going on, but Marlissa Ferrer is trying to create that type of state of mind, and the 1101, which is the character evidence of Daljeet Atwall. Jai Gohel argues it's the state of mind of Robert Woody. In the preliminary hearing, Robert Woody never said he was scared why he did the things that he did. He just said he was obligated because he was involved. Robert Woody already testified to the contrary of being afraid, and Marlissa Ferrer is trying to bring that up. So as typical in this case, they're going to try to determine this later. Marlissa Ferrer actually argued to the court that she's concerned about the time that the jury is sitting down in the jury room and not in the courtroom listening to evidence, and she hasn't been concerned for the last 8 months, but she is now. They started to bring out Robert Woody back into the courtroom, and Jai Gohel made an argument to the court and that he needed to address something else, and Robert Woody was taken back out of the courtroom. And Jai Gohel said that Steve Jacobson is in the back holding their area with Robert Woody. He saw Steve Jacobson in the back room twice talking to Robert Woody as he was coming out, and when he's coming back in, he's pointing and directing him to go somewhere. You've seen him twice back there. Judge Iniga kind of made an ignorant comment. She says, you and Marlissa Ferreira, talking to Jai Gohel, you and Marlissa Ferreira, you seem to make such similar arguments all the time, such broad arguments all the time, and I really didn't think that was appropriate at all. Both were offended by it. Jai Gohel said that he saw Steve Jacobson talking to Robert Woody, and Steve Jacobson giving him directions where to go when he went in the back. Judge Zuniga says it's the DA's office has been in charge of Robert Woody and always has been as far as the transports and stuff like that. Percy Martinez argued Steve Jacobs' recordings show his control over Robert Woody, including his family statements also. The transports to and from Tuolumne County Jail when he was up there, and some of the other things that were said and done, and some, especially with the interview with Sergeant Dombey and Steve Jacobson. Percy Martinez said Steve Jacobson should not have had any contact with Robert Woody at this juncture with him being on the stand. Attorney Hans argued in Department 26 during the prelim, Robert Woody was housed in another county and no one else. Apparently, they think there was nobody else to transport Robert Woody, even though they have transport for that. Robert Woody now in Stanislaus County, and there are deputies in back to control the holding areas for the inmates. During the Robert Woody interview with Jacobson and Sergeant Dombey, then Sergeant Dombey, there was a lot of them just telling that Robert Woody what their case was, and they asking him to repeat it back to him. Even the judge had criticized the way that interview was handled. It's not proper at this time either, due to the history of these people. Percy Martinez again argued it was clear that during those transports with Steve Jacobson, Robert Woody was obviously being coached, and the way things are said and the religious overtones of many things that were done. With Robert Woody on the stand, he said it's not proper. Marlissa Ferreira argued that Steve Jacobson is transporting Robert Woody, but he's been ordered to not discuss anything with him. Marlissa Ferreira, let me repeat that. Marlissa Ferreira said Steve Jacobson is transporting Robert Woody, but ordered Steve Jacobson to not discuss anything about the case. She said this is nothing but a bunch of allegations. The court staff apparently had asked Steve Jacobson to stay in the back with Robert Woody because he has to be set aside, and he's not even in a holding cell. He has to be set aside in a different area away from the other inmates. At this point, Judge Zuniga had a long conversation with Bailiff Amanzo at the sidebar, and she's going to talk to, and apparently it was told that Sergeant Timothy Schwartz had asked to have Steve Jacobson babysit Robert Woody in the back. She also was told that jail personnel, not the district attorney's office, is transporting Robert Woody. Robert Woody's at the regular jail. He's here in Stanislaus County. He's being transported by the transport that comes to the courthouse every day. Not like Marlissa Ferrer had told the court that being transported by the DA's office. Again, Percy Martinez objected to Steve Jacobson having any part of the sitting on this witness. And as it's not been done with any other witness that they've had in this case, and they've had several in-custody witnesses that haven't provided special DA investigators that have investigated this case sit on them in the holding area. Judge Zuniga said she wants to talk to the sergeant, and we'll find out what's going on later. She also noted, too, and I thought it was interesting, that Judge Zuniga said during the preliminary hearing, Robert Woody never expressed any fear of the Atwells or being threatened of any way, shape, or form. for some reason, she made that comment just kind of out of the blue. Robert Woody was brought back into the room. The jury was up at 11:36. So we had about 25 minutes left of testimony time before lunch. Marlissa Ferreira started her direct again. They talked about his court date on 2/14 of 2012. That was his third court date. After the appointment, he saw Frank Carson in the office. Daljeet had taken him to the appointment. Daljeet was in the meeting with them, with Frank Carson. Secretary, he said, took notes on his case and some of the things that he was saying. Payment was to be made by the Atwells. Apparently there was an arrangement made with the Atwells on that. And also the Atwells had bailed him out of jail. Marlissa Ferrer asked him if he had ever talked to Corey Brown on July 17th of 2012, and he's really confused about this. The way the question was asked, really strange. He didn't get it at all. Finally, he said, "Oh yeah, I got what you're saying now." He said, "Yes, I did talk to Corey Brown." So, for some reason, there was an objection and a long sidebar. This was a really long sidebar that they went over there too. When they came back, Marlissa Ferrer was asking Robert Woody that Baljeet Atwell said they would pay for Frank Carson's representation, but no actual cost was ever discussed with him or in front of him. Frank Carson did agree to represent. Again, no dollar amounts were discussed. Next court date was on, he said 3/23 of 2012, but Marlissa Ferrer corrected him improperly so right in front of the jury. It was 3/26 of 2012. And also asked the judge to take judicial notice of that court date of 3/26, 2012. Frank Carson was present for that hearing. Baljeet Atwell also went to court that day. He was in Dee's BMW. She asked him to describe the car a little bit. It was a blue car. The back windows, he thinks, were tinted a little bit. They weren't as dark. They were a little darker than the front windows. After court, they went to Frank Carson's office. They met with Frank Carson. Again, there was no discussion of payment. And after Frank Carson's office, they went to Turlock, and then that's where they made the infamous stop at Mike Cooley's house on Lander Avenue. That's where we broke. It was right at noon. We broke for lunch. Robert Woody will be back on the stand this afternoon, and judge is also gonna have to make a ruling about Steve Jacobson after talking to Sergeant Schwartz of the courthouse security. Don't forget the podcast tonight at 6 o'clock.